December 3rd, 1993, Medellín, Colombia. It is not just an ordinary man being buried. He is the most powerful drug lord of all time. Some called him Robin Hood, while others a terrorist and drug lord. That day, the crowd was so large that the Colombian police and army had to maintain order at the funeral. Why were 25,000 people at the funeral of the most wanted criminal in the world? Why so much chaos and sadness? To learn about the day of the funeral of the biggest drug lord, keep watching this video. Don Pablo, after 16 years as a drug kingpin, his end was near. He was on the run from everyone, from the Colombian and American governments to the rivals of the cartels, and everyone wanted him. The big problem was that no one knew where he was. But the CIA already had Pablo's family under control and were waiting for his fatal mistake. On December 2nd, 1993, Pablo called his son. Pablo knew this was a risk, but perhaps he saw that it was over, and he wanted to hear from his son one last time. This call allowed the CIA to locate Pablo in Barrio Los Olivos, a neighborhood in Medellín. After an intervention by the Colombian army and American special forces, they killed his only bodyguard and Pablo after an exchange of fire. Immediately after that, Viva Colombia was heard on the radio, the army cheering, "We just killed Pablo Escobar." Drug lord Pablo Escobar was killed today, 16 months after his escape from prison. Soon after, the news spread across the nation, causing turmoil in the country. The flashpoint was so great that it awakened people from every corner of the country. The news of his death spread like a plague. News channels couldn't say another word, but Pablo Escobar has been shot dead. The drug lord is breathing no more on Colombian soil. Radio channels were loudly proclaiming that Escobar is no more.
The biggest single blow to international drug trafficking in a decade. But it does not mean that fewer drugs will find their way onto the streets of Britain and America. Authorities expect other drug cartels will simply take over Escobar's business. The king may be dead, the cocaine trade is not.
Crowd's reaction to Escobar's demise was a fusion of sadness and admiration. There was a palpable sense of loss and suffering. The game was changing for the drug dealers, and everyone wanted to take control of the pitch. The government took the Pablo family into custody, and suddenly there was chaos on the Colombian streets. People started to emerge at the death scene. It was no longer just an ordinary day. A myriad of people showed up at the death scene. They were followers of Escobar who came to hail their Robin Hood. He was a ruthless cocaine baron to the government, but a hero to the people of the hillside of Medellín. Colombians will remember him as the man who gave millions to the poor in Colombia. A large number of people arrived at the funeral, and Pablo's family and friends were also there to pay their last tribute. Some were saddened by the loss of their Robin Hood, while others were relieved that Escobar could no longer carry out his criminal activities. The mourners wore t-shirts with pictures of Pablo Escobar, and some carried signs like, "Pablo, you will always be with us," and "Long live Pablo Escobar." Reports say that the crowd was so big that the drug lord's family couldn't even open the car doors that took them to the funeral, and they had to turn around and miss the funeral. The drug lord's family mourned him in silence and fear. The death of Pablo Escobar had a major effect on his family and friends, who were not only grieving his loss, but also feeling the effects of the media spotlight that surrounded the news of his death. After he died, his body was taken to a local morgue in Medellín, Colombia. After paying their respects to the fallen drug lord, Escobar's family fled the scene as reporters and enemies surrounded the funeral. The funeral was held at the Jardines Montesacro Cemetery in Medellín, 2 days after his death. Thousands mourned that horrifying day, saying their last goodbyes. The authorities tried to maintain order, but they couldn't stop those outraged mourners. After stopping the crowd, they fought back and went to the funeral. But the burial was carried out with such urgency that the priest couldn't even perform the prayers due to the push and pressure from the crowd. His family faced many problems: fear of the enemy, pressure from the government, and accusations from reporters. It was one hell of a day when the reporters ambushed the family. Escobar's son, in anguish, said, "We are just going through a lot and trying to make our lives normal. For my mother, my sister Manuela, and me, past 24 hours have been the most intense hours of our lives. Not only did we have to deal with the terrible pain of losing the family head in such a violent way, the funeral was even worse. This day changed so much. Some lost their family head, Some lost their hero, while others got rid of the most notorious criminal on earth. Pablo Escobar was a controversial and polarizing figure in Colombia. People there have different ideas about him. Some admire Escobar as a Robin Hood-like figure who used his power and wealth to help the underprivileged and oppressed in his community. Some Colombians despise him for being a violent and immoral drug dealer involved in criminal activities. Many Colombians say that Pablo is a black mark on the country's history, like Hitler for the Germans. Some say Colombian passports are scrutinized more at airports because of the country's reputation, which irritates them. Since his untimely death in 1993, opinion has been divided over whether he should be remembered as a folk hero or a horror story. What do you think? Does Pablo Escobar deserve so much attention even today? Write to us in the comment.